Task Factory is a suite of SSIS components available from Pragmatic Works. In this video, we'll look at the dimension merge slowly changing dimension. For any ETL developer, updating dimensional data is the heart of what you do. Using out-of-the-box SSIS components, however, is an unattractive proposition. You either have to use the built-in SCD wizard or use the roll-your-own approach. As any veteran BI developer knows, the SCD wizard isn't the best in the world, primarily due to its reliance on the OLEDB Command task. Roll your own, in other words handling all the logic yourself, works, but is time-consuming to develop and often confusing to maintain. A far better solution is to use Task Factory's Dimension Merge Slowly Changing Dimension Transform. While its name is rather long-winded, it's definitely worth the breath. Here you can see I have a package set up that already uses the Dimension Merge Slowly Changing Dimension. For this demonstration, I've set up a couple of tables. One is a table that holds employees. Then I've got a dimensional table for my employees. I have a couple of staging tables. The first staging table holds the output for a type 1 change, and the second for a type 2. I then insert some records in it. Let's actually go see those records. And there we go. I have 5 records in the table with 5 different employees. Here's their addresses, their cities, and so forth. Note 2, the salary column. However, down here in the dimensional table, we don't have any data yet, so we actually need to run this and get some data into our table. Now up here, the first thing we have to have is our source table. So I've got an OLEDB connection set up to that source table. I also have to have the dimension table so that I have a way to compare the records, so I've got another OLEDB source for my dimension. These then go feed my dimension merge slowly changing dimension. When I open it up, my first tab presents me with my input columns. Here's the list of the columns. Now for each column, you have to identify how it is used within the framework of a slowly changing dimension. So the first one I identified was my employee ID column, which is my surrogate key. The next thing I had to do was identify my business key, which is the employee key. For each of my attributes, I had to go through and identify whether this was a type 1 or a type 2 change. And you can see I've done that for each of these. My name and my salary are type 2s. The remaining columns are all type 1s. I then have to declare which columns are my start date and end date. Here, you do that by setting the SCD to effective date and the SCD expiry date. The next thing I have to do is map my columns. So when I click Next, it takes me to the next tab, and you can see my columns are automatically mapped at first, and I can go change these if I need to. The mapping will come to the existing dimension from my source system. The next thing on the list I have to do is indicate my row change detection. These are the columns by which the Dimension Merge tool will determine when changes occur. Make sure you come here to the nullable column and mark anything that's nullable. On the next tab, we indicate how we want to handle our type 2 date ending. It wants to know what variable has the now value. Here I've indicated system start time. I could also pick from any other variables that I happen to have. It then wants to know what is my granularity as far as setting effective and expiring dates. I can go by the hour, the minute, the second, the millisecond. It all depends on how quickly your data comes in. I can record my changes by marking the old ones to end 1 minute ago and the start is now. I can also mark it for 2 minutes ago or 1 minute from now. And of course, this time range depends upon what you set up here as the granularity. I can set my last record expiration date to a value. I can use a null value. I can use the max date time. I can use a specified date, or I can get the value from a variable. Here I'm just going to use null, and we're going to click Next. Now on the surrogate key handling, the default is to let the dimension merge wizard handle the surrogate keys for you. In my databases though, I generally use the identity column and let SQL Server manage that, so I'm going to set this to surrogate key assignment is managed somewhere else. It then asks me about inferred members, which I don't have. Here is the output column selection, in which I can pick columns to output or not output for each one of my types of outputs. Now you can see I have a wide range of outputs. I've got an unchanged output, a new one, deleted, updated SCD1, SCD2 with SCD1 changes, SCD2, I've got an invalid input, auditing, and statistics. For several of these, the dimension wizard will warn you if you don't have an output set up. For example, on the deleted, I can go check a column on that says, don't warn me if I'm not attached. Typically, we don't do deletes in the database, so we'll just check this on. And you might want to look at your other outputs and determine what you want to check on and off so that you don't get those annoying warning messages. On the next tab is our auditing. We can actually set up variables that we can use to hold counters, and then we could use that to log to some table or a text file later. Now when I'm developing my packages, I typically use the BI Express tool, another product from Pragmatic Works, to handle all my auditing, so I generally just leave all this blank. But if you're not using BI Express, and you probably should be, you can actually manually go set all these up. In the logging section, again, I typically don't need this because I'm using BI Express, but if you wanted to, you could come here and check some of these on to gain additional information. On the Performance tab, it has several things you can customize to help speed package performance. Now, by default, these warnings are all off. The wizard will warn you about not having sorted inputs, about not having surrogate keys, and so forth. If you set things up like I've showed you, then you can safely check all these on and get rid of those warning messages. The next and final tab is simply more information where you can go get more help or go see the Microsoft Integration Services portal. Well, we're done, so we'll click Finish. Now once we get the wizard set up, we then have to go through and hook up all of our outputs. In terms of outputs, we have to have 4. We have to be able to handle new records coming out of the transform. We have to be able to handle new Type 2 records. We have to have a way to handle updates to Type 1, and Type 1 updates that were caused by a Type 2, and in addition we want to end date those records. Now here I follow the traditional design pattern. I'm inserting directly into my table for these 2 items. For my Type 1 updates, I'm going to a staging table, and for my Type 1 with Type 2 expiration, I'm also going to a staging table. I've chosen to use staging tables here because that's a fairly common design pattern that most people are familiar with. But having Task Factory, rather than going through intermediate staging tables, I more than likely would have used the update batch transform, which I've talked about in a previous video. So let's actually run this. And we're going to do our initial load of records. And let's move this out of the way. And you can see here, I've got my inputs. I've got 5 rows coming in from the source, and it flows through till I have new 5 rows coming out, and I don't have anything going out the others, which is what we expect because these are all new rows. So we'll click Stop. Let's jump back to our scripts. And we're going to scroll down a little bit so we can see the select statements. Yep, they're selected, so we're going to run this again. Now we've got data in both places, and you can see everything matches up. I've got my 5 rows. Make this just a little bigger so we can see it all. And all of our data is matched. Okay, so there's our new rows. Now what I want to do is force some Type 1 and Type 2 changes to occur within this source table. So let's scroll up here. I've got some scripts prepared for this. And the first thing we're going to do is change Brian's record, which is this one right here. And he's moved to a nice new mansion. So he's going to go from 123 Main Street. He's moving to 456 Oak Avenue. And this is a type 1 change. We really don't care that he's moved. Then we're going to do a type 2 change to Adam's record. And what we're going to do is we're going to update his salary to 1.03. Then we're going to force both a type 1 and a type 2 change to Dustin's record down here. And we're going to change his city from Orange Beach to just the word city. And we're going to change his salary to $99. Finally, we're going to insert a brand new record into our source table. This is Joe Cool, and there's his information. So let's highlight all this. And there we go. And we'll run it. And there we go. We've got our records affected. And now we'll come down here and we'll just select them again. And you can see because we haven't run the package yet, our data has changed here, but it has not yet changed down below. So let's go over and fix that. Let's go to our package and let's run it. Here data is going to flow in. And here we go. We had 5 rows, existing rows coming in from employee. There's our 6 rows coming over from the source because we added 1 new row. Now coming out, there's the 1 new row we added. Over here, here's the 1 row we updated, which is Brian's address. And then we had 2 rows that triggered off type 2 changes. We had one that was strictly a type 2 change, and then we had one that was a combination of a type 1 and a type 2 change. So the new type 2 records flowed out here. Then the records are coming over here are where we're going to expire the type 2, and we're going to go ahead and apply the type 1 changes as well. So that accomplished, we can come back here and validate everything, and we'll rerun this and give ourselves a little more space. So now you can see here's our new record. There's Joe Cool out here, so he's in there. And then Adam had his salary changed, so we can come down here and verify that yes, there's Adam's old salary, and then there's his new type 2 record with his new salary. If we scroll out here to the end, you can see he's been effectively indated. And then there's his null record for his current record. Here's Brian's record with his new address, and sure enough it's been changed, and he only still has the single record because he was just a type 1. Finally, Dustin had both a type 1 and a type 2 change. Well, if you notice, for the type 1 change, we applied it, then we went out and we indated the record. Then on the new record, we applied his type 2 change, which was the new salary. And there we go. Hopefully you can see that using the dimension merge slowly changing dimension transform is a heck of a lot easier than doing either the roll your own approach or having to go through the rather awkward and slow built-in slowly changing dimension wizard. To learn more about this and other transforms built into the Task Factory suite, please visit us at pragmaticworks.com.